Okay, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We have with us a returning guest, Albert Fox Cahn, the executive director of the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. Albert, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me back.
This is an interesting topic. It has to do with video of surveillance and different recognition software that is preventing certain people, mostly attorneys, from entering Madison Square Garden. Am I correct?
Yes, the owners of Madison Square Garden took a novel approach to getting sued. Instead of just fighting in court, they decided to fight the attorneys who are bringing these cases, banning them from going to Madison Square Gardens, banning them from going to Radio City Music Hall, and also just taking their images from their law firm's websites without consent.
Now, by the way, how does it work when you go into Madison Square Garden now with a ticket? Do they screen your face? How do they even know it's you walking in there?
So this is one of the things that would give me heartburn if I was Madison Square Garden's attorney. They are going onto these law firm websites, taking the images of everyone who works there, evidently, not just the attorneys on the case. And then they have cameras at the entrances, and they're doing real-time facial recognition, scanning against a database they've compiled of attorneys at these firms.
So they're able to see who's coming in through these various cameras. It's not like you're looking at a camera. The camera is just searching the crowd, and it's able to say if somebody's part of the class of attorneys that should not be allowed in.
Well, it can claim to do that. The problem is the software is error prone. It's been shown to be racially biased. It's much more error prone for Black women than for white men, sometimes more than 100 times as error prone. So again, it gets to the question of, even if it were legal to do this, it's not clear that it is. What happens every time you get it wrong? What happens when you try to kick people out of a game, even though they have nothing to do with these lawsuits?
Let's talk about, first of all, Albert, whether it is legal. Are attorneys considered to be a protected class when it comes to these private institutions? I can understand if you're discriminating based on ethnicity or on sex, religion, but this is just the class of attorneys, let's say. Do they have a right to be able to enter any private establishment that they want to?
So generally, a profession is not a protected class under federal law. It can be a bit more ambiguous under New York City human rights laws, which are much broader, but generally that's not a protected category. But there are a number of other legal avenues to challenge this. One is that these places serve liquor; they get a lot of money from their beer revenue in particular. And as a licensed place, you actually have to have a license from the state. And one of the requirements is that you serve all comers. They are not allowed to arbitrarily exclude people from a place that is a licensed liquor establishment. And then there are also questions about, well, what happens when you're excluding people using discriminatory software? Is that enough of a potential form of bias in who you're kicking out to bring a challenge under New York City human rights law? As far as I know, no one's ever made that sort of allegation, and it would be issue of first impression.
It looks like a lot of these cases now are looking backwards to some type of precedent with respect to even like the early 1900s, with respect to movie critics who were banned from theaters, that type of thing, or writers from the New York Post who were banned, who wrote certain things. This has been around for a while. And it hasn't always gone the way of the person who's bringing the lawsuit. People have been banned from going into certain establishments if it's private. But you're saying the sticking point here is the fact that there's alcohol being served. So you need a license, and that would be a little different.
That could be one of the things that makes it much harder for them to exclude people. And as the New York Times profiled just a few days ago, someone has challenged this under a law designed to protect theater critics. One of the things that I'm doing at the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project is actually pushing for new laws that would outlaw all uses of biometric surveillance in the future in places of public accommodation. That's something that's been done in Portland, something that I think is long overdue in New York.
Now, you've been on before, and we've talked about police surveillance and cameras that are used as facial recognition to be able to spot those who may have, committed a crime in the past. And we debated that. But when it comes to this type of surveillance, Is one of your objections, and I think you made it clear that it might be, is that the technology is just not sophisticated enough to be accurate?
Well, yeah, the technology is error prone, the technology is biased, and it's even more biased when you're using it the way they're using it at Madison Square Garden, where you're using it in real time, you're surveilling a crowd, you don't have one-to-one images, and so it's much more likely to just get it wrong.
Well, how is it biased? I could understand how it's not accurate, but being not accurate, does that mean it's biased? I don't understand.
Well, according to research from from NIST, from MIT, from Joe Bolamwani, a leading researcher in the space, when you look at the performance of the algorithms that drive facial recognition, a lot of them are much more error prone for Black and Latinx and Asian faces compared to white faces. And this gets into how are you training the algorithm? How are you setting it up to work? And if you are mainly using white faces to train it how to tell two people apart, you end up with an algorithm that is much more sophisticated and much more accurate for, quite frankly, someone who looks like me than for someone who's younger, who's older, who's trans, who's Black, who's Latinx. And so that leads to a lot more people being wrongfully kicked out.
So how is your organization fighting this? And what means? What lawsuits? What avenues are you taking?
So we have a number of lawsuits on the governmental side challenging the NYPD's facial recognition. We represent Amnesty International in one. We've brought one on our own, trying to get the documents about how the NYPD is using the system in practice. We also have a 10-point legislative platform that we introduced in Albany last week, a blueprint for banning Big Brother, as we put it, that would outlaw a lot of uses of facial recognition. And we also have legislation pending at the city council that would outlaw these sorts of uses of facial recognition. And I should say, it's not clear to me at all whether any of this was allowed under federal law, because you still have copyright issues when someone is taking a third person's photograph and using it without their permission as part of this facial recognition system. That could be a potential claim. And there are also issues under something called publicity rights or personality rights. And so there's a whole a laundry list of potential lawsuits that are coming towards Madison Square Garden.
We don't have too much time left, but I wanted you to make a prediction. Where do you think we're going to be in the next 5 years with respect to video recognition and software and surveillance? Is it going to be, the cat's out of the bag and we're all going to be in big trouble? Everyone knows what we look like, and everyone from the dry cleaner to the diner has, a database to be able to go to. What do you think what's going to happen next 5 years?
I think it's going to be a patchwork across the country where we have some states that have more and more privacy protections, where your face, your images, your biometric data is your own. And we have states where it's a free-for-all. It's the Wild West, and people can use this technology however they want. And my hope is that we make sure that New York is one of the states that's actually protecting the public's privacy, rather than just allowing the rich and powerful to use our data however they want.
All right, Albert Cahn, Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. I want to thank you very much. Thanks for coming back. I know you've been here once before, and hopefully you'll come back a third time in the next couple of months and let us know how this shakes out.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again.
All right, stay with us. Today's verdict has so much more right after this.